Welcome back to Innovation Alley. So again, I'm your host, Tim O'Rourke, Chief Technical Officer for Wade Trim. We have the same guest we had last month with Mr. Glen Daigger. I'm going to let you introduce yourself again for those that might not have caught it last month. Vin Rubino, our wastewater practice lead, housed with me in New York City. And obviously Dave White, my co-host, our wet weather practice lead, who's situated in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hooday.
Hooday.
Going to the Super Bowl.
And, we didn't mention this last time.
That's right.
But
Could be.
Glen's a professor at U of M. He went to U of M.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know, I went to Michigan State.
That's okay.
So that's what I said.
I've informed,
I was going to tell you that's okay.
I've informed Glenn of the rift
Yeah.
in this office about
Yeah,
U of M.
I'm not as serious as someone like
It's still Big Ten. I'm actually
You're a Boilermaker.
I'm a
right?
Boilermaker.
Yeah, there we go.
Still Big Ten.
So we,
even though it's
we grew
14.
up hating Michigan, right? No, I'm kidding, of course. Michigan's an outstanding school. So last time we talked about kind of the cycle of one water evolution and covered how it's being emerged as a new paradigm shift. We want to kind of shift focus a little bit on what are some of the tactics and measures to deal with it. So Glenn, why don't you again, since those who might not have heard this last month, just real quickly talk what one water is and then start transitioning to who you are and then and you'll introduce yourself again and we'll go from there and then start diving into the tactics, okay?
So fundamentally, one water is about breaking down the silos between the various components of the water cycle. And it's not that we have to break down the silos so much in terms of how water functions. We've got to break down the silos here.
Right.
And then we've got to break down the silos in terms of the processes and procedures in our professional practice. So it's a change in mindset and then the things that carry through with that. So, and the reason we do it is because we get much higher performing systems by doing that. We can solve the problems that seem intractable. There's absolutely no reason why any person on this planet doesn't have a sufficient water supply and sanitation system. There's absolutely no reason we can do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I'm Glen Daigger. I'm a professor of engineering practice at the University of Michigan. Go Blue.
I'll let that happen. I'll let that go. That's all perfect.
So, engineering practice is, I was actually a full-time practicing engineer for 35 years. I was with a firm by the name of C.H. Hill, which is now part of Jacobs, and I led the wastewater practice for a good length of time, and then Chief Technology Officer also. So that's the practice side that I bring into the academic role.
You brought up last time, you started in 1979.
Yep.
Were you in Corvallis? I mean, were you part of that Oregon operation, and where did you start at?
No, I joined the firm in Corvallis.
Wow,
Yeah,
so you were one of the, I don't know the originals, but early in the growth model. Right?
Well, the firm was formed in 1946.
Right.
So no, I grew up close to Lafayette. And then I spent 10 years at Purdue University getting 3 degrees. So then 1979, I finally ran out of degrees to get, and
let's go apply them.
Patty and I packed up and we drove out to Corvallis and started a practical career.
I had interchange with, and I've mentioned this to you, and with Jim Schwing, who was in Pittsburgh at the time, right? But I think his employee number was like really low. When he started there, it was well, you guys have tens of thousands of people. What do you mean your employee number, whatever it was, right? So it did grow quite a bit through the Clean Water Act, right?
Yep.
Then you're also a...
I overlapped with Glenn at C.H. Hill for quite a while. I worked with him on some work in New York City and other places, particularly on the biological nitrogen removal. I say nitrogen because it's not nutrient in New York City. It's nitrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little different there. And we talked last time that one of the things I wanted to do was bring Glen Daigger to the clients, and that's what we did in New York City. I did want to just kick off this discussion a little bit about one water, and as Glenn mentions, it's a silo. Sometimes we call it a silo. But you know what? The water doesn't get siloed, because one of the things we've identified is the water we drink now has caffeine, pharmaceuticals, PFAS. So it's a water problem and it's a wastewater problem because it doesn't silo itself. It's one planet, the whole thing gets recycled somehow. And that's another aspect of One Water we have to worry about. Whatever we do here affects water
Right.
in another.
There's no off-ramp for PFAS on the
It's still
site.
there.
Right,
It's
yeah.
still there. So
Yeah.
you deal with it one way or the other.
Right. It's good observations. Dave, as our wet weather practice lead, you last time talked a little bit about your focus had been when it's raining.
Right.
Right. Definition, wet weather, right? So why don't you give some thoughts as well as we kick this off, as we start diving a little bit more into the substance of it.
Yeah, for me, what's interesting is to see how it's practically implemented. Like, early in my career, it felt like, you had a community and they had a flooding problem. We got to deal with the flooding. I've got to solve something. There's a regulatory burden on me, or the residents are upset, and you do your study, you'd solve it, you turn in your report, and you'd go back and say, hey, we're going to build a bigger culvert. But now it's about watershed planning. It's about integrated planning, like thinking about how all these things are coming together, and not just how you're going to solve things, but how are you going to pay for it? And do you have enough money to cover the drought, the flood, the clean water, the contaminated water in your aquifers and the groundwater? How do you get all of that done when you've only got so many people that live in your community? How are you going to pay for that? So starting to
How do you
strategize how to
the
prioritize
right
that.
way to tackle it, right?
Yeah, best way for your community and the environment.
Yeah. So it's about identifying the one things that we could do that solve three problems, right?
Right.
It's really that simple.
Can you give an example of something like that?
So we talked about reuse
Right.
in the first one is a good example. If we start looking at the wet weather side of this, and Vin, you were talking about green infrastructure
Right.
and infiltrating into the into the aquifer. So stormwater is a solution to water supply, as an example. So. We talked a little bit about California. It turns out that in Southern California, the rainfall there is enough water to be half of their water supply. But what they do is they put it in. We've all seen the motorcycle running down.
I saw Schwarzenegger get in the water,
Terminator,
L.A. River.
right.
How many LA films have been filmed in
That's
those
Greece.
stormwater highways or whatever you want to call them, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is if you look at water supply management in Southern California, they are one of the locations that I think manages their aquifer the best. I mean, they consciously recharge and so forth, so it's brilliant because they get inexpensive storage. They don't have to build dams. It actually gives them water distribution.
Right.
So their system is, they infiltrate where they can, and then they pump it out where they need to, and the infiltration also manages quality. So that's an example of, again, looking at one thing that solves.
So you'll say necessity is the mother of invention, right? I mean,
that's part
true.
They're moving to significantly expand their potable reuse. But they're also looking to significantly expand their rainwater capture, stormwater capture, and put it into the groundwater. So,
yeah, it's all good. Vin, do you have any other examples that you can think of?
Well, I think we've talked about water reuse, and there's direct and indirect. The story goes people don't like to reuse water as drinking water, but in fact it's been going on for centuries, forever and ever. I live in New Jersey. The Passaic River in some summers is 30% sewage, so it's treated sewage. It gets reused and treated, but I mean that's one water been going on forever, right? And again, you're connecting the water, so if you decide to treat the sewage a little better, you're doing yourself a favor in water quality whenever you need it for some other use. And that's, again, this is the stuff that's been going on forever. People don't recognize that. they often don't see the connection that makes it one water.
Yeah, we didn't talk about this the first time too much, but I think it is something that at least I deal with people that I have as friends that are outside our industry, right? People view water as a given commodity, always available, depending on what part of the world you're in or community you're in. And I don't know, did we create that as an industry over time by being so consistently providing what you need when you need it? And it's not until you start seeing that this is actually a serious risk that people start waking up and say, of course we need to pay for this a different way. Of course we need to look at it a different way, right? And we've all been in the meetings, well, your utility bill, I know this is going to impact you financially, but you're paying 20 times that for cable TV. You can live without cable TV, you can't live without water, right? And I think people have come to just take it for granted that it's something that's always going to be there. I
You
could
know, I
just
think
go
it's
in.
the frog in the boiling water
Yeah.
analogy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Century ago, the water was relatively clean and easy to provide, little or no treatment. And then we grow, we pollute more, we have to treat it. So, and the same thing's going on. Your wastewater was barely treated and discharged to what seemed to be an infinite amount of water to dilute it. And back then, the discussion in the early 70s was, is dilution a solution to pollution?
I remember that very well.
And you can't say that now. It's just everybody recognizes
Well,
that.
the instruments-
you can't do that.
The instruments and the technology to actually detect what's in that water have advanced so much that you didn't realize what was in there
Oh
before.
my God! Now we know
Right.
it's dirty, right?
Right.
So there's a little over time things have changed, and that's the analogy with the frog in the boiling water. Start turning
Oh,
up the heat.
and you talk paradigms. I mean, and you guys know this obviously because we're in the industry. The original sewers in some of these areas were constructed to get the sewage, or even the waste, solid waste from the sewage, and the stormwater off the street out to the waterway.
Yep.
And it wasn't until later that some of these combined communities that use the same pipe to do that started building regulators and interceptors and treatment plants, right? So that's relatively new. And that was always part of the one water concept, right? I mean, it's not a new thing, but that's interesting.
So I had a question for Glenn. As we're talking about One Water, I've heard this discussion about water equity, and we've been talking about communities, and how does water equity play into this, or what is that?
So it is water equity. This is actually the water view of the broader environmental justice discussion that's going on. So and it is part of. You say, why do people not realize what the value of the water service? Well, it's because we never tell them.
Right. I mean, that's part of what I've always said as well.
So if you look at today, how does a utility communicate with their customers? They send them a bill. Why do our customers think it's only about money? We tell them that.
That's your only interaction. Or if we shut your service down, then you call, right? I mean,
Yep,
we're doing maintenance on something. Right. It's you're absolutely right.
So the big initiative by the profession. I'm going to be critical of our profession. So it's the day without water. How does that make the public feel better about water? When your electricity goes off, do you feel better about the electric company?
No.
So water equity is about the water profession also moving beyond a silo. It's our silo that we do what this, we get people their water service and so forth, but someone else takes care of these things. So, and certainly, I think we all know that on a, in broader society, that issues of equity and justice and so forth are coming back. I had to share with you. I have some conversations with young water professionals, and they see this very much. They weren't alive in the 1960s when we had the civil rights.
Right.
So I grew up in a farming community and very much in rural Indiana, and I was a teenager. This was going on. I had no idea.
Where in Indiana did you? If you can say it. Man.
Yeah, just outside of Lafayette, actually.
Oh, okay, so you're a Hoosier through and through.
Yep.
Okay.
I had no idea the things that happen in other places, and so being a naive person, we went through and had all the stuff, and then they passed the legislation. And I didn't realize this until this last decade, but I just okay, we've solved that problem. We haven't.
Yeah, right.
We haven't.
Right.
So I see from a societal perspective that it's recognizing the things that we haven't addressed yet. We as water, we need to be part of that. We need to be part of that solution. I think that's where where water equity comes. It's not easy.
The reliability of it is not infinite, right? You have to, and the whole resiliency movement. And you were talking last time about flood zones and recognizing that, okay, we need to do something with this. We can't just convey it. Or if you try to convey it, we've talked about with huge tunnel systems. Well, that's great. That's a storage vessel, unless you got a pump station that can move 100,000 MGD, right? Whatever the number is. I remember when I was in the Navy, we were on a site doing something, and we found some Indian artifacts. And we had some other work planned for down lower by the York River. I lived in Williamsburg, Virginia at the time. And we brought out the archaeologist. And said, well, we got some work planned down there. And he goes, well, I'm not looking down there. I says, why? I said, well, if you want to pay me to look down there, I'll look down there, but I'm not going to find anything. I says, why? He goes, because the Native Americans were smart. They didn't live down there in the flood zone. They lived up here, okay? This is where you're going to find their stuff.
Yeah.
And we as the next wave of people populating this great continent of ours do move down into some of these areas, and they're surprised sometimes when, oh my God, this just keeps happening, right? And so some of this, I'm not suggesting people should move out of floodplains, but I am suggesting that, but floodplains and flood zones are a natural idea that should be obvious, right? This water's got to go somewhere.
There are places
and there's places other than your basement it can go.
There are places where, around the world and even in the U.S., where people are moving out of floodplains. Some of it is being moved out, which gets into the equity, side of this. So
that gets back to your water equity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, people in Florida can't even afford any kind of insurance for their homes, right? Because they're off the charts.
Yep. There's discussions in Houston about moving people out or not rebuilding to return. So I was thinking about Vin and I were talking last week, and we talked about Tibbetts Creek, right? What's going on
in New
there?
York City.
So the decision is: are we going to store the water in Tibbetts Creek or in basement apartments, right?
Exactly. Well, and we talked about your regional, differences, and that you learn as you grow, right? But when I joined Ben in New York, I was used to elevations 550, 575, 623. We get out to the Bronx, and this is elevation 8. Okay. And this East River goes up and down 8 feet every day, and we're designing a system around it, right? And so it is area specific, some of these challenges in the one water cycle, but the resiliency movement has really taken legs, right?
Yes.
And out of necessity too, because one of the things that's obviously happening, Mr. Wet Weather Expert, is the cloud patterns or the cloudburst nature and the more intense storms that are happening, and so you have to adapt and create one water cycles that can adapt to that and sustain. So
it's always been not only an important part is how we live, how we decide to live. So even water, we tended to stand back and say, well, let people decide this, and then we'll make up the difference. And we can't do that entirely anymore. It was comfortable was comfortable for a lot of people if we didn't have to talk to those groups and so forth, because that can be pretty challenging. That can be pretty challenging, but we've got to get out of this silo of where we're comfortable and start talking to a broader range of parties.
And you sense generationally the younger groups are really gravitating towards the whole sustainability resiliency movement, right?
Yeah.
Do you see, when do you see how the cycles of this going forward? How long and before you think the paradigm is fully shifted, where we're not even, it's just obvious that everyone's looking at this from a One Water perspective, the regulators down to the communities, down to the resident, down to what we're teaching our kids growing up, right? Is it long travel, or is it halfway there, or what's your?
It's definitely on track. So one of the things I've come to understand is that change happens exponentially.
Right.
This is what confuses folks. See something's going on, but yeah, it's marginal. It's marginal, and all at once it starts to become noticeable.
Everyone's got a
impactful.
smartphone.
Yep. And well, how did that happen? It's simple math. Here's what an exponential. So our problem is when this is going on, we do this extrapolation rather than. So my benchmark on things is, has the thing reached this? Because when it reaches that inflection point, then it will continue. I think One Water has passed that inflection.
The inflection point, right?
And
So you could think of other examples of something like the way we've been talking about the movement potential of driverless cars, right? Talked about. At some point, or electric vehicles, whatever your argument might be, it's going to go, and then boom, it's going to take off. We've seen geopolitical things like this that have happened over the years too, right?
Well, to pound on your issue, the term sustainability, we've now talked about it, and resiliency you can consider as a component of sustainability.
Exactly.
20 years ago, sustainability was not even a term used in this industry. When I was with New York WEA, I was founder of the Sustainability Committee. One of the missions we put forth was to educate our own membership on what sustainability was, what the three-legged stool was all about, and the Brundtland Commission from the UN, what they were doing. It was an education thing, and slowly, education. We weren't the only ones educating, but now everybody knows sustainability. It's a mainstream term. It's an engineering issue that we now all address when we evaluate things. So there's a parallel there for One Water. We're now using the term. The term is relatively new. Even Glenn didn't use it in 2006 as much as a seer he was.
What's the buzzword is now is like it's being said all over the place.
Yeah, now it's
Yeah.
mainstream now.
Mainstream.
So now it's, as Glenn said, it's going to start taking over everybody's discussion. They're going to connect flooding with water quality and CSO overflow, wet weather with water supply, flooding and droughts. The connections are now happening, and it's mainstreaming soon as One Water. I think that'll help our industry as well.
I've noticed with you, Vin, and I love New York City because I've been there the last 6 years with you, but it is the largest population center in the country, right? And like we said, necessity is the mother of invention and all of that. So I had a working knowledge of the term sustainability, and I could talk the talk and walk.
Right.
And then I came to New York and worked with DEP and you, and you're Envision certified, right? I went from having an understanding to a full understanding to, yes, I better know this inside out, to an appreciation for it.
Yep.
The why it's important beyond just the what it is, right? And I think that's kind of going to happen with One Water.
Yes.
When it's abundantly obvious that, of course, this is how we should be looking at this. So don't worry about breaking this project into pieces or whatever the example we could come up with might be. Take the long view, take the long version. And you said, find the solution that solves 3 things instead of 1.5 things, right? So what else do we want to cover today as far as the tactics?
I do think that as some more senior folks, I won't say necessarily mature.
He looked at me when he said senior.
I think I think we need to help the young folks as they come in, and their vision of where we should be is not where we're at. We're getting there. I think we need to help them to see where we are getting there, and not get discouraged.
That's a great point, because change sometimes can't happen as fast as the visionaries want it to, right?
Yeah.
I've had analogies for that. I probably can't say them in a podcast, but I grew up Irish Catholic, and I've used this on somebody before that, there was the great missionaries that went to these other parts of the world to start the movement, right? I said, well, if you're a missionary, you can't get upset that not everyone in the continent's having communion after 2 weeks. This is the long game. The people don't change overnight without understanding the why and the what and the wherefore, right? And so that is a good point. And the older people, we've got some experience, right? We know some things. We know how hard it is to change things, Be patient.
And we know what it used to be. We see the progress, and they don't.
Right. But I get the impatience of it. I mean, we were those young impatient people.
We need it.
Right?
We need those that are impatient and pushing. So
if somebody is like a director of utility, or obviously moving in this direction, but seeking just tidbits of advice from an industry icon like yourself, what would you give? Like, where do you start if you're not in that one water philosophy, mentality, organizationally today? How do you start?
I think the first thing is start where you can.
Okay.
Which is about figuring out when you can, which is about where you can stress, what you can stress and stretch your organization to before folks say, oh, this is just too much. And the thing is, you can figure that out by taking steps, right? So that's one part of it is actually stretching your organization. Don Quixote was not successful. You've got to pick your battles. I think the other thing is looking to build partners, both inside of your organization but outside of your organization.
That's what I was going to. Don Quixote, by the way. I was not expecting that to show up today. Good analogy. I actually read that story. You raise a good point, because the one water cycle could, in some areas, involve multiple jurisdictions, right? I mean, a lot of the communities I've worked in have actually a separate water division from the wastewater division from the stormwater management authority, right? And they all have different leaders, and they all might have different viewpoints and what's scratching their itch. And it's a regional issue. Right? And in some cases, it could be a local community versus a county versus right?
Yep.
So it's almost like, if it's beyond your organization, the true solution, but your organization's a key part of it, how do you provide the leadership to sell it to everybody else?
So
do you have examples of where that's happened well?
No, so then go back to use your visual part here. So if you've got three utilities that are responsible for water management and where you're operating, if you buy this, there's somebody over here that does.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to convince this whole. It's about finding those people, and finding the people in this.
3 to 5%.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then conspire.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say connect the dots.
I like the word conspire. This is a conspiracy.
I think there's some good things happening, though. We talked about sustainability. Our younger engineers now view things differently than we did when we come in.
They do.
And sustainability as an application is something that does look at water in different ways. When you measure in an envision sense, if you're rating something by envision, you're going to look at all the pieces and put it together as one rating. So how you treat water, wastewater, you're starting to think about them together when you apply this kind of a analysis to what you do. So I think there's been a change in the training, a change in the tools that allows the younger engineers to look at it differently than we did. and in a less siloed way.
And you and I are living it with our New York operation. We get the two old wise men. Well, one wise man, anyway, there's two of them. And we've got this generation of really talented superstar young engineers that do have a different view about the future of what their job is versus what we might have thought.
And three of which are
and you're dealing with it with students you're teaching, right?
Three of them are vision trained, so they recognize that they want to look at things a little differently, and they recognize this is the way it should be looked at. So,
which Envision is a way to look at like an underground civil engineering project and say, how sustainable is it? Is it saving energy? Is it recycling materials?
It's the lead
you get a
of
rating,
our
like
business.
LEED, right? You get a rating. Yeah.
Right.
There are those that think that change occurs top down. And so I actually got interested in actually understanding how change occurs. And I'm not an expert in it, but I've done enough looking and reading and then trying. Actually, change occurs bottom up.
It does, right?
Because so there are those that say, well, if we had the right policies, good policy needs to be informed by experience, and you need experiences to develop the consensus for the policy. So it's those folks that figure out how to try something even though it can't be done. There's always a way. Well, this is a pilot. This is this and this. It's getting enough examples. So I said conspiracy. It's you could say guerrilla warfare. So a famous quote. So which is what we're discussing here. So Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, one of the famous quotes from Margaret Mead was, "A small group of committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing
that can change the world." Yeah.
It's about that group that starts and creates the evidence that allow these things to happen. So there's a group it's at Monash University in Australia.
Okay.
That it's actually engineers, civil environmental engineers, but that do social research in terms of how change occurs. And they've actually developed, this was looking at how some of the really change water management practices were adopted in Australia. And it starts with just a few individuals that start working together and start creating that the vision, but then create the examples.
The committed, enlightened few that sell the message, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So that's where that's part of what the young people can be part of. So it's about also connecting them, right?
And they can conspire to
They can
convince us.
conspire and connect.
Yep.
They can conspire to connect if they want.
Well, believe it or not, we've actually covered more than an hour on this topic in two phases, but it's been great. You've been a great guest. In fact, I'd probably want to have you come back for different topics.
That'd be great.
Because I think you know more about things than just one water. Right?
Yep.
Is that a safe assumption? And we're always interested in having experts like you weigh in on things that we're struggling with as a company moving forward, not struggling, but trying to get the right paths forward on how do we tackle this fast changing innovation that's hitting us. But on the one water topic, let's bring a close to that with the three guests here. Dave, why don't you start with kind of your observations today and what you see?
Well, I mean, it's exciting
To close
see.
it out.
I mean,
Close out.
we're 3 water, 2 water, 1 water, and how it's interconnected, how you're paying for it, how you're evaluating it. You know, I spent a lot of time with models, of water systems and how does the water flow. And, it was hand calcs, it was spreadsheets, it was one-dimensional. The tools now are getting to the point where you can have the aquifer model with the stream model, with the overland flow model and the ocean. It's all in one package in 3D, and you can track the movement of the water. We couldn't even do that easily, when I came out of school at U of M. So all these things are starting to trend. You've got the tools, you've got the generation that's interested in it, and there's a lot of positive drivers for it. So
And there's some necessity
I'm excited
for
about
it, too.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. Good stuff, then. Then?
Well, I'm gonna approach it as a wastewater guy by background mostly. I saw a quote, I don't know who it's attributed to, but there is no wastewater, only water wasted. And it goes back to what Glenn said. Water reuse is important. The tools we have now are different than the ones we had in the past, but the need is even more important.
Great, good stuff. Why don't you bring it close to it, Glenn? Bring us home.
So one of the, I do get invited to give lectures and so forth, and I kind of have a stock lecture that I've used for in terms of these trends and so forth. And I start off with that we are reinventing our profession. We haven't done that for well over 100 years, but we're in the at the stage of reinventing our profession. So we need to, because if we keep doing what we're doing, we're just not going to in any way meet the need. I'm convinced that we have the tools even today, and we can get better tools, but we have the tools today to have a water and sanitation system for everybody on the planet. That's what we're here to do.
It's great stuff. You know, I think you just picked our next topic. We can't do it today. He's got a plane to catch, but reinventing what we do. I love it. So, on behalf of Weight Trim, thanks for joining us today, Glenn. Vin, of course, you're always welcome, as is Dave. But I'd like to bring a close to this version of Innovation Alley. I'm Tim O'Rourke, Chief Technical Officer. See you next time. This was fantastic. Thanks a lot.